Today I will be showing you how to personalize your boards even more using a Sharpie paint pen in the color silver, along with some different stencils on plastic sheets. This is so that you can add words to your chalkboard along with simple designs. To start, I line up my first letter with where I want my word to start. Generally, I keep the words around the edges of the chalkboard, making sure that they don't go too far into the middle, so that we can leave the middle of the chalkboard open for use with chalk. I fill in the letter to completion and make sure that there aren't any gaps in the silver, pressing down gently with pulling strokes. Once I'm done with the first letter, make sure to wipe down the letter that you used so that when you place down the stencil for your second letter, it doesn't smear any extra paint. Leave the letter to dry for a minute or two, making sure to test that it's dry for when you're done. Right then, it wasn't dry, so I had to wait a little bit longer. When I test it with my finger, I press down and lift straight up, making sure not to pull my finger sideways or up and down so it doesn't smear the paint. Then I line up my second letter next to the first one. As you can see here, I press down my fingers around the O, making sure to gently press down so that the stencil isn't able to move when I'm filling in, especially with a different shape like an O. Again, I'm pulling down in straight strokes and not pressing down with the paint pen so that the paint doesn't bleed underneath the stencil. This will help my letters to stay crisp and clean along with the edge of the stencil. Then I repeat the same process of wiping down the O now that I've finished that letter. As you can see here, when wiping it down, I smeared some of the paint pen, which is what we don't want to happen on our chalkboard, which is why we need to leave the letters to sit for a second, and then we test them. In this video, I have sped up the footage and left gaps so that we don't have to sit through it drying. However, in real life, we will need to let it sit for a few minutes so that each letter has enough time to dry. Now I fill in my third letter using those same long strokes and not pressing down as much. I was struggling with the V over here, so as you can see, I pressed down a few times, which is what you should not do when using these stencils. This can create a way for the paint to bleed underneath the stencil and mess up your word. As you can see here, I touched up the letter since it bled a little bit under the stencil. You can always freehand and draw your words on with your own handwriting. However, the stencils can help to keep your letters straight and all clean. Once again, I clean it off with a paper towel. Then, after testing the V, I line up my last letter. I do the same process, pressing down on the stencil so that it isn't able to move. And I use my paint pen to fill it in. In my program, I'll provide multiple different stencils so that you can choose the best one to fill in for your own words. This one is a more clean-lined, straight version of the words. As you can see here, I pressed some dots for detail on the edges of my word, creating a simple design that helps me to personalize the words a little bit more since I'm using a stencil. And I fill in a little heart in the middle of the O since my word is love. Now you can easily personalize your boards with different words and different stencils. I hope your boards turn out fantastic.